In today's world of market volatility and uncertainty, your retirement plans need to be front and center. With ever-changing tax laws, healthcare worries, and an unpredictable stock market, don't overlook the vulnerability in your retirement planning. Protecting your family and estate will be difficult with shifting policies in Washington. It's more important than ever to keep an eye on retirement.
Hi, and welcome into Eye on Retirement, the weekly show that keeps you in the know about all things retirement. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome in. And if you're one of our many longtime viewers, welcome back. We've got a full show for you today. I'm your host, Rick Everett, along with a full complement of panelists to include Johnathon McCoy of Market Advisory Group, Pat Dougherty with Market Tax Services, Trey Basa with Market Medicare Advisors, and Gerald Eidelman of Eidelman Law Firm. In this show, we're going to be visiting about a gentleman by the name of Roger and his wife who own land that they would like to subdivide so that their son can build a house with his wife. This causes estate plan concerns to arise when they think about the possibility that the son may move and they want to protect the family property in the event that their son would get a divorce. Roger's wife, Sarah, was recently diagnosed with cancer. Roger retired to take care of her and went on the Affordable Care Act insurance. Keeping their reportable income down was key to them in being able to afford health insurance. Capital gains from their portfolio create an unpredictable income, which could increase their insurance premiums. They are having to look all over the place for tax, legal, and investment advice. Johnathon, how does Market Advisory Group step in a situation like this to address the variety of issues that this couple is dealing with?
Yeah, and you know, we talk so frequently on our episodes about the number of people that are dealing with all these same issues. It's not that everyone has the same estate or the same assets, but just this wide variety of issues between how do we manage our property and assets, how do we manage our income, how do we manage our investments, how do we manage our health insurance, and what happens if both of us pass away unexpectedly? How is that estate designed to be there, be protected, avoid probate in the event that something unfortunate happens to you or your spouse? And making sure that the state and the IRS are not your biggest business partners in this whole ordeal. In Roger and Sarah's situation in particular, their first and primary concern, the reason they came to us, is they had already started shopping around for estate planning services. So they were working with an estate planning firm, and their estate planning firm had brought up a couple of things to note that they brought back to their financial advisors, and their financial advisors said, well, you really need to talk to a tax advisor about these issues. So then they started seeking out a CPA, and it was about that exact time that they actually came to one of our in-person classes, which is another great way that we look to educate folks on a lot of these issues. So after coming to that class, they came in, and in the meantime, they actually have seen a couple of episodes of Eye on Retirement and said, you know what, you've told a few stories along the way that really check the first 4 or 5 boxes in our situation. In their circumstance in particular, the estate planning was really the biggest issue. And how do they manage their land, their property, which is the largest part of their portfolio? And when in talking to a traditional financial advisor, just think about if you sit down with that financial advisor and say, what do we need to do to protect this land for our family? A financial advisor who's only used to dealing with stocks, bonds, and mutual funds isn't going to be able to give you any of that advice. And that was where it was preeminent for us to bring in Gerald in this case and Eidelman Law Firm's team to ensure that that was the first priority we had to address. The investments, the income management, the health insurance management in this case was almost secondary, but still very important. But we had to address this issue so that ultimately so their son could start building his home that he plans to move into. So having the entire team available was crucial in this case.
Gerald Eidelman of Eidelman Law Firm. How is estate planning crucial to protecting their assets in a case like this?
Well, part of the situation is that the land that they own was just one individual single piece of land. And they wanted to partition a portion off to their son so that he could build a house. Now, he would need to get a mortgage to build this house. So the land had to somehow belong to him. But they wanted to create a protection. What happens if he gets divorced? They don't want to be, landowners with their ex-daughter-in-law. Or what happens if the son wants to move? Who is going to buy that plot of land. So part of what we had to do is figure out, okay, how are we going to continue ownership of this property for the parents after something triggered either a divorce or a move out of state. And that was quite complicated because we have a lot of moving pieces. We had to figure out what the financing would look like. You couldn't get a financing just by keeping the land in the name of the parent. So all of these things played a big role in trying to develop a trust and other contracts to make sure that the parents wouldn't lose this piece of property should the son get divorced or move on to a different place.
You know, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be divorce.
That's
but
right.
It's a less than perfect world, and it is something that comes into play quite often.
Absolutely.
How many people would you guess that you meet with when it comes to estate planning, and they're wanting, in an example like this, they're wanting to pass something down to their son, but they don't realize that if a divorce were to happen, whether it's an inheritance or land or whatever the case is, if it's inherited, whatever the asset happens to be, it then becomes marital property unless there are safeguards put in place.
Well, I mean, inherited property doesn't necessarily automatically become marital property, but people make it marital property because they tend to commingle their money with their spouse. And in the process of doing that, they take what would be non-marital property into marital property. So one of the things we have to do is, it's amazing how people don't think about that because they're confident that they have, or their child has a good marriage. But we all know, I mean, you know, from personal experience, how many people have a wonderful marriage and then 3 years later, all of a sudden, everything falls apart. So you have to plan for that. And you can't do it without having a trust so that it can protect the property, the inheritance, and keep it outside the hands of the child to become marital property. So it gets a little complex, but it's absolutely necessary to do it that way.
Jonathan, this is one of those cases that has a lot of moving parts to it, and more often than not, when you're sitting around the conference table with prospective clients, you are bringing in the team of professionals to help kind of navigate through the weeds.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in this case, Gerald was involved from day one because I had actually talked to them when we first met in person, not even in the conference room. We were chatting out at the class that they had attended, and it was readily evident that they were going to need some significant estate planning. Like, as I mentioned, the first thing they told me was, you know, we're already working with an attorney on getting a trust together. And I brought up a couple of concerns just based on experience I've had with Gerald in some of these meetings prior with similar circumstances. Say, you know, your attorney may not be looking at everything here, especially the tax consequences to not only you and your estate, but also your son as the primary beneficiary of the estate. And that was ultimately what made them decide to come in and sit down for a consultation in the first place. And their initial apprehensiveness was, how much is this going to cost? And that's why we reiterate all the time, this consultation process is 100% free to you. It's 100% free to come in, sit down with all of these professionals and have that wide-ranging conversation, because we're likely going to be asking a lot of those questions you wouldn't even know to ask in order to address all these issues.
You know, you referenced these classes, and I was wondering if you could share with our viewers how they can find out about where the different classes are. Is it as simple as going to a website?
Yeah, you can go to ionretirement.com, marketadvisorygroup.com. We do have links to a lot of the events that are up. A lot of people will see the invitations on Facebook feeds, and we do occasionally send out mail invites to specific individuals that we think could benefit from attending these events, and those are complimentary as well, so there's no cost to attend. And the important piece there is just knowing where to go and where to look for this information, because most of you out there may be saying, okay, well, I've got this land, maybe I should start Googling or looking up online what I need to do. Understanding that your situation is very individual and very specific to what your goals and needs are. That's why we reiterate sitting down with a group of professionals from the get-go.
Do you have a whole team of retirement professionals looking out for your best interest? If not, what crucial piece of information could you be missing? At Market Advisory Group, we practice a holistic approach to retirement planning, from the financial aspects to tax planning, estate planning, and Medicare advising, and we do it all under one roof for your convenience. If you'd like to set up a complimentary, no-obligation consultation, operators are standing by right now to take your call at 316 316-252-8707. Again, 316-252-8707. And check out our website at ionretirement.com. We'll be back with more right after this.
When people work with Market Advisor Group, they get a feel of sense of family. There's a lot of relationships that are made and going on in this conference room, and we really take a lot of pride in that and a lot of satisfaction in that.
Every client we work with, we make a custom-made plan to fit them and help reach their goals in life. Another thing that makes us unique is we want to meet regularly with our clients and have reviews.
Market Advisory Group, we have a process, and the process we take people through is first to understand what they have, understand who they are, and then we put together an income plan for them and show them how they can look forward to retirement and not look, though retirement is going to be a stressful time. It needs to be a stress-free time.
A few unique features of working with Market Advisor Group is holistic in-house financial consultants. We've got an in-house CPA, Joshua, an in-house estate planning attorney, Gerald, an in-house Medicare advisor, Bill. We rely on all of those professionals for, again, additional service within our consultative process, making sure that we've got the advice and the expertise behind the recommendations that we make.
You know, as an advisor, I'm not there to sell them one way or the other. I'm there to educate them, to let them know what their choices are. Then I try to help them make the right choice where they can save money and feel confident in their decision.
Absolutely the best part of my job is getting a stack of paperwork from somebody and they don't know what to do, and then I can turn around and give them back a tax return, but also to be able to explain what they can do next year that will give them a better answer than what they had this year.
When we've got clients that are calling and they need to help out a child or need to help out a grandchild or need to help themselves out and they're in a situation they didn't expect to be in, I really relish the opportunity to help them through that, help them make the educated decisions in somewhat stressful situations, because a lot of folks don't have that type of counsel.
We meet with so many people one-on-one in this office that don't ever end up becoming a customer or doing business with us, and that's okay. But when they leave our office, we know that we've helped them either get some answers to some of the questions they had or get some clarity on maybe their own path.
But one of the things that we hear all the time is, I wish I would have met you guys 10 years ago, because how much further could I be down the road? Well, Johnny Appleseed said, you know, when's the best time to plant a tree? 10 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. And so if we can help people today going forward, that just brings an incredible amount of comfort and excitement for us to come to work every day.
Hi, and welcome back into Ion Retirement. As we were sharing in our first segment today, Roger and Sarah's estate plan was the primary focus originally when they met with the team, but through asking some questions on their health situation and considering their insurance, how did tax planning come into play to make all the difference here? Pat, with Market Tax Services, how did the tax planning come into play in this situation?
Well, they were on the Affordable Care Act for health insurance. And when you sign up for the Affordable Care Act, you have to project what your income is going to be for the year. Okay, you don't know exactly, but you have to project it. And then you could possibly get a credit based on your income level. Well, if as the year goes by, if you're all of a sudden getting lots of dividends and interest and capital gains from your investments, all of a sudden your taxable income goes up. And if your taxable income goes up, then your credit is being reduced. And you don't know that, most people don't know that until they fill out their tax return and they say, why do I owe so much money? And you say, well, because you made so much money that your credit was reduced on your health insurance. And they don't know that. And it's terrible news to have to deliver, but you have to deliver it nonetheless. So it's good to plan ahead, because with brokers, they want to give their clients, you know, the maximum income they could have. Most of it might be taxable, but if I work with Jonathan over here, we might be able to find out ways they could still get that type of return, but it won't be currently taxable.
Now, in this case, prior to meeting with us, they were working with just an individual advisor, a financial advisor. And so that firm, per se, had control over all the changes to their portfolio. So when the advisor was making trades, income was being generated. But because of the fact he was an individual and not working with the whole team, the CPA has no way of knowing these things.
The broker has no way of knowing it. The CPA has no way of knowing it unless they had it before. But really, the problem comes in with the investment income, because they have a little bit of Social Security. They live off a little bit of their savings. They live very modestly. So, you know, they were comfortable, but all of a sudden they're getting these capital gains and interest and dividends that are pumping up their income. And until the end of the year, most people don't know that their affordable care tax credit is going to be reduced.
Trey Basa with Market Medicare Advisors. Pat and Jonathan talked about the income affecting insurance costs. Is that a real concern when it comes to the Affordable Care Act and Medicare?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a thing called the IRMA, the Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. That determines your Part B, Part D premiums according to how much you are earning 2 years back. So in 2023, they're going to look at 2021 and what you filed and what was your income. Depending on that, your premiums can fluctuate. Uncle Sam will always bump you up, but you have to actually ask for reconsideration if at any point your taxes do reflect that you are making less in any given year.
Jonathan, how often does it happen that you're visiting with a client that had been working with an individual advisor, and the thing that your client brought with them to the meeting that they didn't know they were bringing was Aunt Irma?
Yeah, exactly. She's the worst aunt of all. And as Trey mentioned, this is a 2 years after the fact surprise, because the IRS only is able to deal with your most recently reported tax return. Well, adjustments to your Medicare premiums in this case are not made until January 1. You do your taxes in March, so it's effectively 2 years later, and we call this the sneakiest tax or surprise tax that exists in our tax code today. And virtually every day, Pat and I actually just met with a gal yesterday that was her primary concern was, you know, I'm paying an extra nearly $3,000 a year in Medicare premiums because of a tax adjustment that I was trying to make on my IRA 2 years prior. And this was advice that was given to her by a trusted friend, what she considers the financial guru in her life. And she had to send her friend an email saying, hey, thanks a lot for that tax advice. Now you're costing me an extra $3,000 a year in my health insurance. And this is something that even that financial guru in her life, he was a finance professor actually at a university, he wasn't even aware of it. So having regular access to all these professionals is not just designed to be there for the benefit of our clients. It's so that as we're putting this plan together, we have noted and addressed all of these corners. We talked in depth with Gerald about the estate planning side, but all of these things are connected and go back to what is the level of income they're going to need to live on, how can we maximize the return on their investments and minimize the risks so that if there's another 2008 style financial crisis on the horizon, how are they able to live on these assets? But in the meantime, how are we also reducing costs, reducing taxes, and making sure that their lifestyle is provided to them at the lowest possible expense?
It takes a whole team to effectively plan for retirement, and if you don't have a whole team working with you, what part of information are you missing that could end up costing you money? At Market Advisory Group, we provide the holistic approach to retirement planning, from estate planning, tax planning, investment advising, as well as Medicare advising. And we do it all under one roof for your convenience. If you'd like to set up a complimentary, no-obligation consultation, operators are standing by right now to take your call at 316-252-8707. And please be sure and check out our website at ionretirement.com. We'll be back with the wrap of this episode right after this.
How confident are you in your current financial plan? Do you know with certainty how the recent market volatility will affect your future hopes and dreams? How much are you paying in taxes? And how much are you losing to unnecessary high fees? You didn't work to save this money so that you could spend your time worried in retirement. Now is the time to take charge of your finances so you can feel confident about your future. Call in during the next 30 minutes of today's show only to set up an absolutely complimentary, no obligation, full-blown financial review that will result in your own customized written plan. This is a $999 value that we're giving away complimentary to the first 10 people who respond. We'll start with a full-blown analysis of what you already have. By running a report to untangle how much you are currently paying in fees, how you're allocated for risk, and what it's costing to work with your current advisor. Next, we'll identify your goals. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Where do you want to go, and who do you hope to go there with? Is your current financial plan set up to get you there without mishap? Let's design a roadmap to create a financial plan you can follow with confidence. Get the piece that so many people are missing from their retirement. Find out how having a written plan can make a difference to your retirement dreams. Call now to schedule your complimentary, no-obligation, full-blown financial review today.
Hi, and welcome back into Ion Retirement. In this episode, we've been discussing Roger and his wife, Sarah, and they're another case which is so common where they were unable to get all the advice they needed under one roof and have all those involved communicating together. Jonathan, how does this impact them, and what's the difference with the Market Advisory Group team?
Well, we have to start with where were they when they first met us. And, you know, their current plan was leaving them exposed to potentially higher health insurance costs, higher taxes in general, and ultimately a higher reportable income than what they were actually living on because of how their portfolio was being managed. So from an investment management standpoint, health insurance management standpoint, and a tax planning standpoint, these three departments here between investment managers, Medicare advisors, and tax team were crucial in putting sort of the new financial stream together for them. But getting back to their initial concern, which was the estate plan, how do they protect their assets and primarily their real estate from not just Uncle Sam, but also the state in the event that both of them were to pass away. And unfortunately, Sarah, in this case, having cancer, likely terminal, unfortunately, but as we've talked about in previous episodes, whether it's an unexpected divorce or the unexpected loss of a spouse, we have to have a plan in place ahead of time. And if we didn't have Gerald in this case, an Eidelman law firm, the tax team, the Medicare advisors, and the financial advisors all working together, folks are left sort of out in the cold, having to look around, you know, maybe getting a business card from their financial advisor for a so-called trustworthy CPA or tax professional or estate planning attorney. And people end up in this situation where you have to be the messenger. You have to be able to interpret all of this information that a certified professional is giving you and translate it to another advisor who's not certified in that area to make adjustments to the investment plan or make adjustments to the estate plan. And it leaves people sort of in a lurch where it ends up costing them more money, more time, and unfortunately if something happens in the midst of trying to get these plans together, you could be left out in the cold.
We're going to get to the estate planning portion in just a minute, but Pat, I wanted to ask you, going back to our last segment, when we were talking about IRMA and the fact that it's a 2-year window from when it can be triggered to when it's discovered, it sounds almost sneaky.
It's very sneaky. Tax preparers, a lot of tax preparers don't know about it. It doesn't show up on your 1040, but it could, you know, sneak up on you, and all of a sudden 2 years ago you had big income, you're going to have an increase in your Medicare. But because it doesn't show up on your 1040 tax return, your tax preparer isn't going to say anything about it most of the time, unless you have you do a lot of tax planning, but your standard tax preparer isn't going to tell you about it.
Another reason why having the tax planner as opposed to a preparer is crucial in effective retirement planning. Now to the estate portion, Gerald. In this case, once their estate plan is established, is it just a matter of set it and forget it?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, you know, in this case, we know that there's going to be some changes when the spouse passes away, and we need to account for that now, and we also need to be prepared to make those changes later on in life. Laws change all the time, interpretations of the law. I mean, the IRS, you know, keeps reinterpreting the law in all these different aspects that have an impact on how you plan your estate. And so I regularly visit with folks, and we go over what they have and figure out if things have changed. I mean, they had a new grandson, they don't have a piece of property anymore, all of these things become relevant regarding how they're planning their estate. And so some people will come to me with a estate plan that sometimes is 10, 15 years old and is staler than a week-old donut. You just can't do anything with it. And so you have to revamp, restate, redo a lot of the things. Whereas if you continue to make improvements over time, you don't get caught in a bad situation when the time comes to use the estate plan.
Now, when a will is drawn up or a trust is drafted, once they're placed into effect, do they remain in effect forever?
They remain in effect forever up to a point. If, for example, if you were single and then you married and you had a child, the will would no longer be valid. That's a quirk of our law. But in general, once you set it, it's set for good. The problem is, of course, is the changes in circumstances that make that perhaps that will obsolete.
So that being said, how often should somebody have a will or a trust reviewed by a professional such as Eidelman Law Firm?
I suggest between 3 to 5 years at least, and obviously whenever there's a change, it should be reviewed right away.
Jonathan is just another example of how having the whole team come together. If any one of these pieces were missing, it would have been somewhat disastrous for these folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, we started with the conversation with, okay, we got to get in front of Gerald. We've got to talk to the estate planning team to address these more preeminent concerns around the estate, the land, and the property that they wanted to be able to give to their son and have him build a home on. So the living circumstance there was priority number one. And secondarily, the husband had actually brought up that they were trying to keep their income low for health insurance cost reasons. And while they were essentially living off of cash, which normally is not generating much income, their portfolio was actually generating more income that was reported to the IRS than what they were living on. So immediately we bring in the tax team with Pat. And when we start talking about the health insurance concerns, we also reiterate that not just their Affordable Care Act insurance, but also Medicare could be subject to cost increases based on what their income is in the future. So putting the entire plan together requires the whole team.
Having a whole team working for your retirement planning is crucial. And if not, what piece are you missing? Operators are standing by right now to take your call for a complimentary, no-obligation consultation at 316-252-8707. And please be sure and check out our website at ionretirement.com. I'd like to thank the whole panel for being here for this episode of Ion Retirement. That's about all the time we have this week. I'm Rick Everett, reminding you that we're here to keep an eye on retirement.
This broadcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The views, statements, and opinions expressed herein are those of the individual speakers and not necessarily those of foundations and its affiliates. The information contained herein does not constitute an offer to sell any securities or represent an express or implied opinion or endorsement of any specific investment opportunity, offering, or issuer. Any discussion of performance or returns is not indicative of future results. Each individual investor situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstances. Foundations only transacts business in the states where it is registered or is excluded or exempt from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by security regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. Legal services are offered by Eidelman Law Firm. Tax services offered by Market Tax Services. Market Advisory Group does not provide legal or tax advice. Investment advisory services are offered through Foundations Investment Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.